introduce the speaker. It's Tim Jackson. Some of you will have seen him here before. He's a senior lecturer and course director in computing, software engineering at Canterbury Christchurch. He's been employed as an educator for nearly 23 years and been an active advocate of the use of is it XR? Yes, XR, and immersive technologies within education for a number of years. There's a lot more he said as well, but I'm not going to go through all that. So
it is on a slide, by the way, if you really want to read it.
So we'll go straight into the presentation. Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. Good evening, welcome. It's nice to see all of you here. It's nice to see people online who've joined us, so thank you for being with us this evening. I do have a slight confession to make, and that is I might have slightly changed tonight's talk a little bit. Okay, but I'll explain what I've changed and why I've changed it. It's still very similar to what it was I was going to do. It's just a slightly different focus, but I'll explain why. So yeah, we're at Canterbury Christchurch University, and I've entitled this particular presentation, The Evolution of XR in Education, Past, Present and Future. So I am a senior lecturer here at the university. I've been here for just over a year, so December 2023. Before that, I was a program director at East Kent College at Broadstairs, and I was there for 22 years. So I've been around a little bit. But as Bob quite rightly said, you know, immersive technologies, XR technologies is kind of my thing at the moment. But in terms of teaching, I've taught quite a wide range of different topics. And some of my ex-students are here today, and yeah, they've been subjected to some of those lectures. So let me just give you a quick outline of what it is I'm planning to do. So a bit of a welcome and explain what the change of focus is and why. And I've just going to give you a little hint there. I've just said that it's all about the challenges of new technologies within education. As I've just explained, I've taught in further education, I've taught in higher education, in further education, and now I'm teaching just purely in higher education. So I've had a foot in many camps, and from that, different perspectives and different experiences. And it was really quite interesting what's happened over the last 6 months. So I just want to share a little bit of that with you, and how that's impacted on what I wanted to talk to you tonight and what I'm going to do about that. Okay, so it's all about these challenges within education, which is ironic because that's actually part of what we're here to talk about, you know, VR in education. And some of that is that sometimes it doesn't go the way you expect it to. Then I'm going to do a very, very brief, and I mean a very brief introduction to XR. It's going to be focused on VR. A lot of you have seen the slide I'm going to show you already, but some of you haven't. So I'm not going to assume you know anything of what I'm talking about. So I just want to set the context with a very simple graphic to explain really what virtual reality is, and therefore the context of what we're talking about this evening. And it's going to be in the context of past, present and future. Okay, so it's all about my experiences over the past, probably the past 5 to 6 years, which might not sound very long, but in technological terms, that's an eon. That's a long time. Okay, so what's really been happening with me over the past 5 years? So some use cases, some examples of VR in my previous teaching practice. And again, it's interesting, some of my ex-students are here this evening, one of whom in particular has actually experienced me teaching in virtual reality. So it's really good to see you, Tom, in the flesh as well, you know, not actually the other side of the screen. So I want to talk a little bit about the past, and then I want to talk about the present. Well, what am I doing at the moment? What's my current focus? What practical applications am I trying to use in terms of XR and immersive technologies? And then the future, where do I think we're going with this? So where are XR technologies going to take us? Where is immersive technologies going to be taking us? And the focus is within education, because that's where we are, right? I just want to point out, though, that when I talk about education, I am talking about learning and training. So it is quite easy to translate what I'm talking about from an educational context and turn that into a training context, commercial training context. And we have actually we did run a while ago now, an event for local employers to kind of explain to them how XR and immersive technologies could be embedded within their own training within a commercial environment. And it wasn't that dissimilar to what we're doing in education, other than, you know, being perhaps a bit more focused with what they want the outcomes to be. And then right at the end, as Bob has said, we're going to have question and answers, both from our colleagues online and people in the room. So look forward to that. That's a quick bio about me. Awful picture. I'm not quite sure why I chose that, but it's the only one with my new bins. Some of that Bob has already spoken about, and as Bob said, yeah, I did say a lot more. It's on the screen. You can read it at your own leisure. I am not going to read that, but if you want to, you can do. If you need some bedtime reading. Right, so welcome. It's really nice to see everybody tonight. And as I said, originally I wanted to talk about the practical implementation of VR within a learning environment. So not just education, i.e. university or colleges, within a commercial environment as well. But I've had to change my focus slightly. So we are still talking about practical application in a way, because I'm going to show you what I've done in the past, what I'm doing now, and what I plan to do in the future. So it's a different type of practical application tonight, and I want to talk about why I've needed to do that. But before I do, I just want to mention one thing, and I've already okayed this with Bob. He's crazy enough to say, yes, you can come back again and do another talk. So the next talk I do, which will be later in the calendar year, so probably beginning of next academic year, will be the practical implementation of VR session I wanted to do tonight. Okay, and it's going to be, if you like, a guide to how you would set up a VR environment within an educational establishment in terms of the hardware, the software, the licensing, the challenges, and the student feedback, and how that all happened. Okay, but I can't do that tonight. Why can't I do that tonight? Well, going on to the second bullet point, challenges. Things don't always go the way you expect them to do. Okay, and that's kind of a bit of a problem, because I really, really wanted to talk about it tonight, but I can't. Why? So, as I said, I've had a foot in both camps, colleges and universities. What's really interesting, and before I left the college back in December 2023, I built a virtual reality lab. We had, as a group, built immersive rooms across the 6 campuses of EKC Group, and that included virtual reality as well. So there's 2 things to consider here, and I've put them on the slide. So you've got these opposing experiences relating to funding, firstly, and operational issues, secondly. So colleges have a different way of being funded, and they operate in a different way to the way that universities are funded and operate in a particular way. To put that in a nutshell, and I'm not going to rant, I promise I'm not going to rant, but I do want to make a really important point. So the way that universities are funded, we're not part of the EU anymore, we're not part of that mechanism anymore, we're not part of the Erasmus scheme anymore, which significantly reduced our research opportunities and research funding. So we now have Innovate UK, who are one of the funding bodies, one of the places we can go to say, hey, we've got a really great idea, we want some funding, please. And they'll say, well, does it match the criteria that's part of our agenda at the moment? And it either does or it doesn't. If it doesn't, your project is delayed. If it does match the criteria, you then go into a pot with other people who've got not necessarily the same ideas, but similar criteria. And then it's a case of, okay, well, that will go in front of a panel, and the panel will choose the project or projects that they wish to fund that will support a government agenda. Okay, so even though you might meet their criteria and you go in front of the panel, that doesn't guarantee you're going to get the funding. You could walk away with nothing, or you could walk away with a pot of money that then allows you to extend your research. So it's a little bit of a lottery. Okay, and sometimes those funding opportunities might not come around for months, maybe a year or so. Okay, so you really have to watch the funding environment to make sure that you're hitting the criteria and applying for the funding as soon as you're able to, and the process is quite convoluted. So that's Innovate UK. But when you get the funding, it's fantastic, because they'll throw money at you and you'll do what you've got to do, and then you report it and you go, wow, isn't this amazing? Yes, is the answer. How does that work in colleges then? Differently. is the answer, because what colleges have the fortune to be able to do is they exist in the FE environment, and therefore the government says, hey, colleges, you need to be doing more things. We're going to throw some money at you. Here's a pot of money. And the most recent one from EKC Group, actually, was a set of labs, 3 labs, one at Broadstairs, one at Canterbury, and one at Folkestone for assistive technology. So that's things like robot cats that you can stroke and they purr and things like this. A lot of it was in the health context as well. It was really, really interesting what they were doing. But they had money. You would have to apply for it, but the money is almost guaranteed. And I use that word really, really carefully. So the most recent pot of money was from a system called the Local Skills Improvement Fund. So if you could prove that the money you want for all these wonderful things you want to do will improve the local skills of the population, great, there's your money. And we're talking a fair lump of money, okay? So the criteria for that funding application is significantly less complex than something like Innovate UK, okay? The one that we used as a college, and I'll talk about we when I was at the college, for the immersive rooms was levelling up funding. And the college group, so it wasn't just EKC Group, it was Mid Kent College, and I think it was North Kent College as well, were awarded somewhere in the region of 1.2 million. So again, a good lump of money, which was then split between the colleges to be able to implement the Immersive Centre, the immersive rooms. And again, that funding was kind of, well, okay, we want to do something immersive. What's that mean? Well, I'll tell you what, as a college, we'll define what it means, and then you just say, yeah, that's fine. So the funding mechanisms are a lot looser for further education. And I'm reading a lot of the time on LinkedIn where colleges are pushing out, look at this, isn't it amazing what we're doing? We're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. Bradford College is doing some amazing stuff at the moment. Burton College is another one. And I'm looking at that thinking, wow, I'm so jealous. Because I could do so much with that. It doesn't mean they're not, it just means that I could, right? And it's a bit of a frustration. Because in higher education, you really have to fight for it. And you don't always get it, even when you fight for it. So that was one thing, that's a frustration. The second frustration was an operational experience. So, and again, I don't really want to talk about this too much, but it's important to highlight, and I'll kind of like allude to this in my next lecture later in the year. We have laws, right? GDPR, Data Protection Act, Computer Use Act, and all those. Some of those are really, really important when we're talking about storage of data. Some of those are really important when we're talking about licensing of software. At the university, it took 6 months to go through an IT procurement process and a legality process with our legal department, completing a DPIA form, which is the worst form I've ever seen, but incredibly necessary because of the legal loopholes. It was unfortunate that we dropped in the fact that this particular software that we were using called Body Swaps also incorporated a level of artificial intelligence by analysing student performance and giving them individualised feedback, because that then just opened up a whole new can of worms. And part of that was to do with the Cyber Essentials First Plus regulations that were brought in. So the university takes it incredibly seriously, which you would expect them to. And we tiptoed through the regulations and the legislation to make sure we ticked every single possible box that we could. That took 6 months of a lot of hard work. That was most of my summer, going through that process. That was an operational experience that I know I'm going to have to go through again when I get another piece of software. Colleges, on the other hand, and I remember this because I was part of the process, built the immersive rooms, got the VR headsets in place, right, what software do we want? Body swaps. Fantastic. That's good. Let's go buy it. There's a lump of money from the budget. Let's go buy unlimited licenses for 12 months. Nobody thought about what happened at the end of the 12 months. So it's now not being used. Because guess what? Budget went. No money left. Did we worry about DPIA forms? Did we worry about IT procurement? No, just downloaded the application, put it on the headsets, set up the accounts. Body Swaps was set up and ready to go at the college within 2 or 3 weeks. There was still some configurations to do after that with Arbor XR, which was the management software, but Body Swaps as software was up and running within 2 or 3 weeks. And I went through a process of 6 months here just to get the agreement that it was okay to buy it. Then we bought it. Then we installed it. So you see what I'm saying about operational frustration. So how's that impacted tonight? Simple. It took 6 months to do all of this here at the university, which meant I couldn't get access to Body Swaps until the end of semester 1. And I have one of our colleagues here this evening who I subjected to Body Swaps at the very last week of semester 1, didn't we? So I therefore couldn't give students that experience. Therefore, I couldn't get their feedback. Therefore, I couldn't stand here tonight and talk to you about how to do it, because I've not done it yet. I've gone through the process of getting ready to do it. So basically, that's what I mean by I've moved the practical research to semester 2. So we're now coming up to semester 2 from next week. So all the research I wanted to do in semester 1 has now had to shift to semester 2, because only now have we got Body Swaps in place and installed on the VR headsets. And I've now booked those VR headsets every Friday, 3 till 5, ready to go from next Friday. So by the time when Bob allows me to come back and talk again, then, you know, I'll have the data I wanted to share with you today and the process I've gone through, hardware, software, licenses and everything else. That's why I can't do it tonight. And it's worth setting that context for understanding why. Okay. So in the meantime, I want to share with you some of my own experiences from the college where I didn't have to worry about IT procurement and licensing and DPIA forms, because we just did it. And the reason partly for that was because it was during lockdown. And all the rules went out the window during lockdown, because it was kind of, just do it. We need to engage the students. We need them to carry on with their learning. Don't care how you do it, do it. So that was March to June 2020. So it was a 4-month period. And basically we were told on the Friday, right, midday Friday, we were said, from Monday, remote learning. What the heck does that mean? No one's done remote learning before. And we all went away scratching our heads going, flipping out, what do we do about this? And some people sent emails. Some people phoned their students. Some people even sent things by Royal Mail. Here's some paperwork to work on. Yay. I had one person sit in a meeting say to me, oh, it's been a great last 4 months. I've been able to get all my training up to date. I could do all the things I wanted to do. I went, really? What about your students? Oh, I just sent them paperwork every so often. I said, how did you check their learning? And yet myself and Tom and our colleagues were in VR 21 hours per week for 4 months. And boy, did we work hard. So Friday, I sat there thinking, what am I going to do? I know, I'm going to do some VR stuff. And this is going to be part of my past experiences. I'll explain as we get there. Yeah, by Monday morning, I think it was 48 of us in VR, ready to go. That was an amazing 4 months. Well, I thought it was. You might give me a different opinion. It was pretty good. All right, I'll go with that. I'll take that. So it's when you have adversity, like a pandemic, that forces technological change, and it forced the use of virtual reality in education. So whilst COVID was a really, really bad thing, and I don't want to downplay that in any way, I always try to look from the good side of things as well. For me, there was a real positive that came out of that lockdown. And that was how we can use technology in education and learning to make sure that we're still engaging our students. And we can do that on a global scale. Because it doesn't matter where you are, I can reach you using a VR headset. How cool is that? We call that democratization of education or democratization of learning. So that was from March to June 2020. And then we're going to look at some things I'm doing at the moment that I'm doing at the university regarding XR in education. And I'm going to finish with some thoughts about where we could be heading in the next 18 months or so. And this is partly based on reference to a recent XR summit that I went to at Meta's HQ in London. That was in November 2024. And for those of you who are on LinkedIn, I did actually write an article about it recently. So go and read it because, well, not just because I wrote it, obviously. Please go and read it because there's some, I think, some really insightful ideas and thoughts in there that I've taken from that summit and I just wanted to share with everybody. So if you get the chance, go and check out my profile, go and have a look at, I've set it as a featured article, so it's near the top of my profile. If you're interested in XR technologies and where we could go with it, go and check it out. And as it happens, I have got a link to it in this presentation. So it's kind of, this is the past, present, future thing that I'm talking about. I will say that as we go through, there are loads of links in this presentation. This presentation will be shared with you. And the links are there for extra reading and extra watching for you, because I've put some videos in there as well. So if you want to know a little bit more, if you see text that's underlined, that's a link. Go check it out. And I've got some really interesting stuff that I don't have time to talk to you about tonight, but I've shared with you in the hope that you can go and have a look at it. So very quickly, what is XR? So XR is extended reality. It's an umbrella term that incorporates three key technologies: virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. Okay. Not going to talk about augmented or mixed reality tonight because the context of this talk is about virtual reality. But what I will do is bring up that graphic. And that graphic really just, if you like, summarizes, I think, nicely these three technologies and how they overlap with each other. So what I will say, on the right-hand side, virtual reality, everything is computer generated. So you've got this essentially mobile phone strapped to the front of your head, which is not always comfortable. And everything you're looking at is computer generated, you and the environment. So your avatar within a computer generated environment. That's what virtual reality is, and that's the context in which we're talking about tonight. The other two, mixed reality and augmented reality, bring in the real world. But depending on the level of engagement and level of interactivity, if you're just looking at something, that tends to be augmented reality, you know, where you've got the IKEA app and you can put the settee, make sure it fits, augmented reality. Whereas mixed reality has a much higher level of interaction. So the digital elements tend to be a lot more complex. So they, you know, they could be engines that you could take apart, put back together again, and you can do it with the real life background, if that makes sense. So it's a lot more interactive and a lot more complex. That tends to be mixed reality. Mixed reality, by the way, is used an awful lot in healthcare at the moment. Surgical theatres, which you have to be really careful about because you've got to be licensed to do it. But a surgical theatre recently, a surgical nurse used mixed reality to make sure that all the surgical instruments were in the right order, ready for the surgeon to perform the surgery. Mixed reality was not used in the surgery, only in the preparation of it. But you had that level of interaction that enabled the nurse to do that. But virtual reality is what we're concentrating on this evening. So let's start off with past experiences. So I've said XR, but it's VR we're concentrating on. So this is some examples from my previous practice of VR in education, specifically around the time of the pandemic, and how I fell into using VR in education. And it was purely because of the pandemic that forced me to go down that road. So it all goes back to February 2020. In fact, it goes back before then, probably even January 2019, maybe, when I first got involved with an organization called Educators in VR. A good friend of mine, he died recently, unfortunately, Daniel DeBosky-Bryant. Big shout out to that guy, because he is the reason that I'm in XR Technologies. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be stood here today talking to you about this stuff, you know. So he was one of the co-founders of Educators in VR. He came up with a crazy idea of saying, hey, let's have an international summit over 6 days, 24 hours a day, because it's international, right? And let's do it purely in virtual reality. What? And then we sat there and we thought, actually we could do that. We could do that. And we did. And it was the very first completely virtual international summit. Now, I just want to kind of fine tune the wording here. We're not talking about a remote conference. A remote conference could be through Zoom, which is what we're doing this evening. That's not virtual. Now, some people would say, well, yeah, it is virtual because we're like virtually not there. No, that's remote. Using Zoom, Teams, or anything else where you are digitally there, but not physically there, that's remote learning or remote conferences or remote meetings. When we're talking about virtual meetings, we're talking about using an XR technology to create the environment you're within. Normally virtual reality, because you can like create pretty seats and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I'm using the word virtual in the correct sense and not in the sense that other people use. So I just want to draw that distinction. It's really important. But it was the very first one, the very first one. And this happened February the 17th to the 22nd, 2020. We used a variety of VR platforms. So AltSpace, which unfortunately is no longer available. Microsoft bought it and then shut it down. Why? Because they've got their own platform. I know, right? So again, you can see where the links are. Anything that's underlined is a link. So I've got a link there for AltSpace to explain what AltSpace is and what it looks like. The link under no longer available is one of the articles that talks about why it's no longer available and what happened. We also used Engage VR, really, really good platform, quite realistic, very realistic, but really processor hungry. And if you've got a really bad internet connection, forget it. Which doesn't mean anything to anybody, right? So that's what would happen. But Engage is a superb platform, and some of the things they're doing is amazing. I would encourage you to go and have a look. Some really interesting things. Roomy was another one, a little bit more low res, so it was okay. And then Mozilla Hubs, which was that was more of a web-based VR platform. So you access that through a web browser rather than through an application that you ran. Again, there's a link there, and again, it's no longer available because Mozilla decided, well, we're going to shut that down and hand it to the community. So it does exist, but it doesn't exist from a Mozilla's point of view. It exists from the community's point of view, and the community run it now. But again, there's a link there that tells you all about that. So although I've said no longer available, that's not strictly true. Now, during this summit, I was responsible for the equality and diversity track with someone called Anna Siegel. Yeah. Lovely, lovely lady. And that's her LinkedIn profile. She's doing some amazing VR things at the moment. She's just completed her doctorate, her PhD. So well done, Anna. And that was all about immersive technologies and so on. Going to have a look at her profile. So we did a lot of work together in setting up the VR environments to run this equality and diversity track. And we had 6 full days of guest speakers. We were hosting events. We had interactive sessions going on. Yeah, wow, that was intense. Great, but intense. But what was interesting was because of this event that happened in February 2020, the timing was amazing. When I was told on Friday afternoon, we've got to go remote on Monday, I'm thinking, I'm not going to go remote. I'm going to go virtual. And that was what influenced my teaching during lockdown. One of the craziest things I've ever done, but boy, that was cutting edge. And I was one of only maybe 2 or 3 people in the world doing that. Really innovative practice. And that's what it looked like. So the image on the left was my setup at work. So that's kind of like my lab. It wasn't always that messy. It's just I had stuff, as you do, right? So that was my setup during the International Summit at work. And the one on the right is my setup at home. So you can see very, very similar. I did actually feel like a DJ at one point, which is quite interesting. There was one day, I think it was a Wednesday, where I had guest speakers. Literally, my first guest speaker was in Australia, and then Japan, and then Europe, and then the States. So my first 2 sessions, I was at home using the image on the right, and then I had to quickly pack everything up because it's the same laptops. I had to pack everything up, get to work, because we were still teaching, right? So I then had to get to work, set up at work so I could run the European guest speaker slots, right? And then pack everything up and then run home to do the evening slot for the American guest speakers. That was a crazy Wednesday. But we did it. But it was only because we were using VR technologies that allowed us to do that. Okay? And you're saying, well, why didn't you just stay at home for the whole thing? Well, because it was February, we were still teaching. We weren't in lockdown at that stage. We still had classes. So I was slotting things in all over the place. That was a very interesting time. So I just wanted to show you physically what that looks like, IRL. Anyone know what IRL is? In real life, right? So when we talk about virtual, I want you to realize there's a physical set of entities behind that that's making that happen. And if you can't see it, but I've got a Quest 2 headset in there. Anyway, so that's what it looks like in real life. Now you're going to say, but Tim, we want to see what it looks like in virtual reality. Glad you said that, because there you go. That's what it looks like in virtual reality. So these are just a couple of snapshots from the International Summit. Yes, that's me in the rather attractive looking hoodie. That's in AltSpace. Remember that, Tom? Do you remember that? Yeah, that you're in there, by the way. So these are 2 completely different scenarios. But they're both in AltSpace VR. I put both of these in to show you that you can have different environments depending on the context of what it is you're trying to teach. Okay, so I've already said this, but we were told on Friday that we were going remote on Monday. The International Summit gave me an idea. And over the weekend, I created a series of virtual worlds for 21 hours of teaching per week. And I mainly used AltSpace and Engage. And I used Discord for audio if we were having one-to-one tutorials that were more private conversations. So you can still see us in VR. You can still see the 2 people talking. And I think I used, if I remember rightly, a cafe environment, so it was relaxed. But the audio was coming through Discord, so the conversation was private. Because a lot of people were suffering, including me. And the point I was making here, the second to last bullet point, this was just as important for me as it was for my students. And I needed the students as much as they needed me. And it was virtual reality technologies that allowed me to do that. Otherwise, it's quite likely all of us would have gone a bit stir crazy. The very first session I did on the Monday morning was a session here, VR in classrooms, fighting COVID-19 my way. I was being really indignant. I'm not going to let this virus stop our education. And I was being really indignant about it. And we went on to do a presentation about it in VR about this. And that's the link that will take you there. So if you want to see what we were talking about and the context of fighting it our way and what that meant, then the link is there. Go and watch it. Take it to YouTube. And here's some more snapshots from my VR teaching. So the snapshots before, if I just go back, that was from the International Summit. That's from my teaching. Okay. Now, brownie points. If you could tell me which platform is on the left. Yeah. And why do you know that? Because I said it about 5 minutes ago. So if you look at the poly count and if you look at the environments, these 2 shots on the left are AltSpace VR. Now, given that I told you the name of the other platform that I used on a regular basis during my teaching, you should now be able to tell me what the name of the platform is on the right-hand side. And if you were listening to me as intently as I hope you were, you should know the answer. Engage. Engage VR. Okay, so can you see the difference between the 2 platforms? Lower poly count on the left, a little bit more comical, I guess. but you didn't have the same connection issues because it was a lower bandwidth requirement. In other words, we didn't need so much speed to be able to transmit this. But if you look at the other image on the right-hand side, a lot more high definition, a lot more realistic, a lot more going on in terms of what's being displayed. And we had some challenges with that, okay, where, you know, we were dropping connections sometimes. That was a real technological challenge. I think at one point, one of my lectures, the guys in the room kind of sent me a message saying, Tim, your sound has dropped out. I didn't know, I was the one talking. Yeah, you were probably going, yay! So yeah, I disappeared from the stage altogether. So obviously there was a bandwidth issue there. And that was the difficulty with Engage, but it was an amazing platform if you've got the right amount of bandwidth. So I just wanted to show you just two examples of the sort of environments I was teaching in during COVID lockdown, and they're both VR environments. And then other opportunities followed. So this is still from my past. So once some of my connections realized what I was doing, this led to other experiences like today, but 5 years later, where I'm stood here talking about what I was doing 5 years ago. Right? All right, just a couple of weeks, maybe a month less than 5 years ago, but 5 years ago. If I hadn't done what I was doing back then, I wouldn't be stood here now. Okay, and it's the VR technologies that allowed me to do that. But other things happened as well. So I don't know if any of you know Julie Smithson. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're following me, you will see there's a lot of stuff that she shares. She's actually, with her husband, she runs a number of companies, all to do with immersive technologies, XR technologies. One of the ones that she runs is Women in XR. They just had their 200th event in VR, which is amazing. I did a podcast with her about what it was like teaching in VR. Now, I did actually try to find the podcast. I wasn't going to play it for you, don't worry. But it was really interesting because that was at the time, and I'm talking about it at the time it was happening. But unfortunately, that podcast isn't available anymore. For some reason, they've deleted it. I don't know. Shocking. But I have got Julie's a LinkedIn profile up there. Well worth having a look at some really interesting XR technologies she's using at the moment. I then did a follow-up lecture about VR, in VR, about student experiences during lockdown, and it was set on the moon. So we were on a moon base, and you can see the Earth in the background, and I'm on a stage with 3 of my students talking about what happened. And that's a link. Okay, so you can go and have a look at that. And then I had a series of international, obviously online lectures, but a lot of them were remote. I couldn't go there. They were all online lectures. And they were all about the use of XR and immersive technologies. Okay, so I had podcasts, I had VR sessions talking about what we were doing. I had online lectures that I was talking about, all about XR and immersive technologies. And that kept me so busy. And I'm still doing them now, not just tonight, but I did one a few weeks ago for the VR ARA in Madrid. That comes up in a sec. Okay, and I'll just put this in here, just as get you to think about something in a slightly different way, because when we look at VR, we think, oh, Beat Saber, right? Or we talk about roller coaster, epic roller coaster, yay! I'm talking about education in VR, but actually, I went into this meditation and mindfulness in VR, and guess what? I'll put you a link so you can go and have a look. Amazing. The visualizations and the audio that comes through, so relaxing, and I needed that, and I used it a lot. So there was lots of other opportunities. That was the image from the VR session with my 3 students talking about VR during lockdown. You can see the Earth in the background. That's the moon base I was referring to. Okay, and those 2 links, by the way, they're both underlined, both point to the same place. So if you missed the first link, you'll get the second link. And that was on the 8th of May, 2020. During lockdown, this was taking place. Crazy times. I choke up a little bit about it sometimes when I think about it, what we all went through and the way we use technology to be able to do that. What happened after lockdown? Gosh, it was like it happened yesterday. So once we came back to campus, we were then involved in a series of projects to say, right, okay, look at what we've done. What can we do with that? How can we take that innovative practice and use it post-lockdown? I mentioned earlier on that I was involved in projects for immersive rooms across multiple sites for EKC Group. I built robotics labs and with VR capabilities. Again, you can see there's links there. You can go click on them, go and have a look. I'm not going to show them to you now because we don't have a massive amount of time. I would encourage you to go click on those links. There's some really interesting visualizations going on in there. And I also went on to build some XR-based resources at the college where I worked. So the VR lab was 20 Quest 2 VR headsets, broadcasting to just standard monitors. And in order to make those monitors interactive, I just used Google Chromecast devices. So it wasn't an interactive, like a TV. They were just bog standard £100 monitors with a £25 Chromecast in the back. And that suddenly became a little TV that I could then push out a VR output to, basically. So I could broadcast. And I actually had 20 machines broadcasting at the same time. It kind of did push the Wi-Fi a little bit. And IT may have complained afterwards. But I did it. And that was April 2023. And I know that because that was a crescendo moment for me. I'd spent 2 years to get to that point. When I got those machines, those VR headsets, pushing out to 20 monitors using Chromecasts, that was my crescendo point. That was the point I said, I did it. April 2023. And then I was looking for my next adventure. I ended up here. This is my next adventure. I also created some digital twins of some of the key resources at the college using a technology called photogrammetry. So if you want to know what the immersive room looked like, click on the first link. If you want to know what my VR and games lab, robotics lab looked like, click on the second link. And I randomly went and did the same thing for the motor vehicle workshop. If you want to know what that looks like, click on the third link. They're all live links using photogrammetry. You would have seen that. Basically, I don't know if you've seen estate agents use them now. So it's like remote viewings. You just click on the link and it takes you in and you can just walk around, or they'll automate it so it takes you on a tour. Well, that's what that is. But I've given you control to walk around where you want. So cool. Go and play with it. And I mean, go play with it. So what am I doing now? What's my present? Well, I'm now at Canterbury Christchurch University since December 2023, hence the link to Canterbury Christchurch. And I'm just doing loads of research and I'm loving it. Absolutely loving what I'm doing. So I'm now able to do more research into the use of XR and Immersive Technologies. That's part of my postgraduate studies. I co-authored with one of my colleagues, Gareth Ward, a great guy, and we've co-written the university strategy on the use of XR and Immersive Technologies across the university, which is something not many universities have done. They've done it for individual departments, but they've not done it across the university. We have. And we've created this new entity called the Immersive Centre, which I'm the technical lead for, and therefore the implementation lead. And that's the stage where we've gone past the strategic part. We're now at the technical implementation part, which is what I wanted tonight to be about, but that's going to be the next one now. And this has led to just loads of projects and outreach activities, and we've done loads. Last year, in the 6-month period, we did 15 different events for internal and external partners using virtual reality. And here's just a few of them. Use of AI within VR technologies. That was an AI conference in May 2024. A series of practical VR workshops on the theme of space, which was a lot of fun, actually. And that was for the Inspiring Minds School project. And I've put a link to Inspiring Minds. And we also did another VR project at the Innovation, called it Innovation at the Kent Science Park event. That's what it was called. It's not a misspelling or anything. And there's a link to it, so you can go and have a look. I've done more online lectures and seminars, both in the UK and internationally. So for Evata Global, that's a link to them, the VRARA in Madrid, Spain, which I spoke about, and of course, British Computer Society, Kent branch, and others. So it's kind of like spawned all these different projects. Yeah, and it's not slowed down. So how are we going to move ahead with VR software implementation? So this is kind of where we're at the moment. So we've got loads of options, not as many options as you might think. So when you're seeing people talking about, oh, we're doing this, they're likely all using the same software or very, very similar software. The problem we have at the moment is that industry recognise that education is really important for XR technologies, VR specifically. Meta are now saying, oh, well, we're going to take education seriously now. So they're now bringing out management software to help us manage the VR headsets in education. Up until, well, November 2024 is when they formally launched it. So up until 3 months ago, they were doing nothing for education formally. They were developing something, but it wasn't formally done until November 2024. Prior to that, it was all about commercial VR. Well, how many organizations do you know that use virtual reality? Not many. And Meta was saying, well, that's our core business. Trust me, it's not. Your core business is training people to use it. Education is your core business in terms of virtual reality management. They've now realized that and they've gone, oh, okay, let's now swap. And the result of that was this event that I went to. So a couple of things to think about when we're talking about VR content. It can be subject specific, so technical content. I've put some examples up here. So IXR Labs, they have VR content for engineering, medical and science. Yes, all of those links are for resources that relate to those 3 topic areas. Oxford Medical Simulation, I think you might have mentioned that a little bit earlier on. That's medical, obviously. I've put a link to them and some examples of the VR software that they use. So you've got the subject-specific side, and then you've got the flip side, which is the interpersonal skill development or soft skill development. So it depends on how you want to view that. But it's interpersonal skills, how you interact with people. Okay, and that's a different set of software, and we use body swaps. I mentioned it earlier on. And we use that within academic, professional services, as well as external stakeholder training environments. So you can see now there's a crossover between education and the commercial environment for training. We can use the same software. Okay, and again, I've put a link there. Oh my goodness, I'll be here all night talking about body swaps and the sort of things that you can do with that. But a good example of that would be presentation skills, job interview practice, managing conflict and difficult conversations. How do you manage prejudice in the workplace? Well, guess what? There's a simulation for that. So you can go into it and practice. And it will give you AI-driven feedback. Oh, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have said it quite like this. Think about saying it like this. All right? So it's really good stuff. I've had students in there very, very briefly, and it's been, you know, pretty much positive in terms of the experience. They've only been in it for a little while, so it's a little bit limited what they've been exposed to so far, but it's been generally quite positive about what VR, or the impact that VR can have in education. But there are other applications, not just VR, but AR and MR applications that we're investigating at the moment to think, okay, can we use that in education? We did do a schools workshop using augmented reality, where they were drawing pictures, and then we just used AR to bring them to life. And it was amazing because they drew like a footballer. He just popped up in front of them in the colours that they'd drawn. And there was a little game where you could like score goals and things. They really liked that. But the people who really liked it, more than the children, guess? The teachers. The teachers loved it. And they're going away saying, we can use it for this, and we can use it for after school clubs and all the rest of it. Great. So I just gave them everything, gave them all the resources. Say, go on then, run with it. Let me know if you have a problem. There is a video that I've put there. I'm not going to play it now. You can play it yourself. I think some of you would have seen this video before. It's 30 seconds long. but it's all about industry's perspective of VR-based soft skills training and the impact it can have on commercial learners. Okay, so that's well worth having a look at. So actually that is embedded. If you click on that, it will play. All right. But there's a link down the bottom for the same video in case this is sent out by PDF. So where are we going with this? I'm just wary of the times, and Bob's going to start looking at me in a minute. So what are the key technologies we need to consider when we're planning to use XR in education? Good question, Tim. And there's some answers. So we would need to look at an additional variety of options for VR software to be able to implement VR across a broad curriculum area. Okay, not everybody is teaching medical or engineering or construction. There are many, many other curriculum areas that would benefit from the use of virtual reality. Okay, the NHS is currently doing a lot of research on using virtual reality for trauma victims. And there's a lot of work being done for dementia patients. You know, although technically it's health, actually there's real psychology behind all of that. It's fascinating what's going on. Okay, so we need to be looking now at the broader scale and saying, okay, well, what else can we do with this? To the point now as a university, we are now actively collaborating with another faculty that has games design and development embedded within it. We're now talking to those lecturers to say, hey, how about we do some collaboration with your students? Yeah, games dev, fantastic. All we're doing is we're gamifying an environment, aren't we? So we're taking a real life environment, we're gamifying it in some way and putting it into a VR headset. Can you do that for us? Oh, yes. So we're now thinking, right, well, what do we need to gamify? What are the 3D assets we need to create? Because guess what? The gaming students are really good at doing things like that. Okay, the computing students are very good at managing it. Let's work together. So that's on the horizon. That, and ironically, that's called horizon scanning. So, you know, that's on the horizon, that's coming. We're having those discussions at the moment. And moving forward, we're going to be working very closely together to make in-house virtual reality applications a reality for the broad curriculum across the university. It's going to take time, but we're on the right path. That's the important thing. And I think in the next 18 months, you're going to see this play out. It's going to be really interesting. So talking about subject-specific technical content, it's limited at the moment. And the developers are aware of that, but it takes time to develop these resources and they're trying to catch up with what we need to have, but they're not there yet. And they know they're not there yet. Use of AI within virtual reality is another area that's really hot potato at the moment. The School of AI is actually part of the Engage platform. Okay, so you can actually talk with some historical figures, and the voice is what they believed based on the evidence they have and the resources they have. This is what they believe they would sound like. They would be talking using the phrases they would expect them to say based on historical documentation. And you can have a conversation with them, ask them anything you like. Yes, please, go play with it. It's really interesting. If you want to freak yourself out slightly, do it in a VR headset, because Engage you can play through a web browser. You know, so you could have a conversation, for example, with Florence Nightingale or Benjamin Franklin or Nikola Tesla, if you wanted to. How cool is that? So that's going to play more and more of a role. This is a recent launch, like last 6 months. AI role-play simulators is part of the body swap setup, where you can actually set up your own scenarios with body swaps. So yeah, okay, I want to have an argument with someone. How am I going to manage that? Well, let's change the parameters. So I have the argument that I need to have that I want to train on. So that's what we call AI role-play simulators. That is hot off the press. It's in beta at the moment. I'm one of the people working with body swaps to test it for them and give them some feedback. And I've got until the end of the month to do that. That's how new this is. Okay, and that will be pushed out in their latest update. At the university, we have plans to create digital twins of key university resources, as well as the campus itself. Fantastic for transitioning students. People are worried about new starts. People are a little bit anxious and get scared about going somewhere new for the first time. Don't worry, mate. There's a digital representation of it. You will know where to go and who you're going to meet without you actually going there. So you can spend the summer as, acclimatizing to the university, so you know where to go on your first day. And there's going to be little videos playing in there of like the program directors or the course directors. So you know who you're going to be talking to and what they're going to be saying to you. And we would use photogrammetry to do that. And we can play that in VR if we wanted to. So it could be web-based or it could be VR-based. You're giving people options because not everyone has a VR headset. Although the number of people who do is now growing. So there's two technologies behind that. One's called Victory XR. They're a commercial organization that actually produce digital twins for you. Or you can do it yourself with photogrammetry, which is some of the things I was talking about in a previous slide that you can go and look at, using a technology from an organization called Matterport, okay, which is high-res 3D walkthroughs. And we also want to have further development of the Immersive Centre and expansion of the current hardware we've got. So we've got Quest 2s at the moment. I've put in a funding application for a class set of Quest 3 headsets. Why? Simply because Quest 3 will allow us not just to do virtual reality, but it also has the option for augmented and mixed reality as well. So it gives us a lot more options when we're coming to implementation. Nearly there, Bob.
Okay.
So what's next? Okay, well, I attended the Meta Educators XR Community Summit in London. There's only been two of them. One was in the States and one was in London. So that was like the European version. Obviously in the States, that was the Americas version. They got 100 top XR educators from around Europe. And I was lucky enough to be invited along to that, to go and talk about what's going on. What are we going to do about it? That was November 10th to the 11th, 2024. Fantastic opportunity to share ideas and share resources and experiences. And there's a lot more to come from that. And here's some of the things that were announced. So Meta announced the beta version of their Meta for Education VR management and deployment tool. My goodness, we've been waiting for that for about 12 months. And now it's here. And it's an amazing bit of kit, which means we can push things out to VR headsets, we can control them, and it stops people going off and clicking on things they shouldn't be clicking on, like VR chat, okay? Which actually could put someone at risk if they end up accidentally going into something. Okay, that's a safeguarding issue, folks. We can't afford to have that. So that tool is really important, and they announced it back in November. They also announced a pilot for metaversities. That's basically digital twins of whole university campuses. And there are 6 university campuses across the United States and Europe that are partnering with Victory XR to push this out as a technology. So that's the trial at the moment. And the other big area that's coming is wearables, so smart glasses. Okay, this is becoming an emerging area of development. At the moment, it's only audio, image capture, and video feed. So you can walk about, have a conversation with yourself, maybe do some translation, have a phone call. You might go click and it'll take a picture of something. You might click it again, it'll do a video feed. It won't record it, it'll feed it somewhere. Okay? But we're now getting to the point, and you'll see there the link that Ray-Ban are working with Meta for these AR glasses. I'll put you a link there so you can go and see. There's some really funky styles, by the way. The next generation of wearables is going to be visual based, not just audio. So you'll still get the audio, but you're going to get the visual output as well. So that would be, for example, like AR based sat nav in your glasses with an audio feed. So you can see where you're walking. At the moment, I've got to walk around with my phone doing this, pointing at the room. You know, how's that helping me? I want to do it through my glasses. I don't want to be pointing a phone at a road or in here to see if I can fit a wardrobe in. I just want to be able to do it through my glasses and go, oh yeah, that will go over there. Or, oh, that's the road I've got to take, is it? Oh, there's my latest Pokemon I've got to capture. Oops, no, wrong thing. Got to catch them all, right? So Ray-Ban are working with Meta on this technology, and oh my goodness, it's really, really interesting, the applications that could come from this. Okay, so next generation wearables is going to be where it gets really interesting, where you're going to get video feeds, not just audio. watch this space, watch this virtual space. Sorry, stupid joke. There's a video about the collaboration between Victory XR and HTC, which is a big headset manufacturer in China. Again, I'm not going to play it. You can click on the link. It is an embedded video. Help yourself. Okay, but the reason I've given you these links, the reason I've given you these resources and these videos and all the extra reading is because it's really interesting. And if you want to know where we're going with VR, go and have a look at this. If you want to know where we're going with AR and MR, go and have a look at this. And there's more to come. I've literally just scratched the top of the iceberg. If you go and read my article that I wrote, that I published on LinkedIn, that I think I might have mentioned that already. If you go and read that article, it goes into a little bit more detail than I've had time to do this afternoon. And my finishing point, I always bring this slide up right at the end. The key to success of implementing a new technology, whether it's XR, immersive technologies, or anything else, is about managing expectations. Managing your expectations as to what you think you're going to be able to do with it, and managing the expectations of the people you're working with. See, the problem with VR is when someone puts on a VR headset, they expect it to be photorealistic and super immersive and to do all the things that I can do in real life. No, well, not at the moment. I can play you a video that will be pretty realistic. But if you want to be fully interactive with something and you want that to be photorealistic, oh my goodness, that headset has got to be super powerful. And at the moment, the only way you can do that is if you plug it into a PC, and you're not going to be able to walk around too far with that. It's got a long lead, but not that long. So managing expectations is really, really important, and understanding that at the moment the technology is limited. Remember the first mobile phones? Just to carry around in a suitcase. Look at them now. So let's give this technology a time to evolve. And our use and how we use these technologies is going to change over time. And I'm predicting 18 months, you're going to see a radical change in the way that we're using XR technologies. Okay, so managing the expectations is really, really important, and making sure you use the technology for the right purpose. It's not magic, but boy, you can create magic if you do it in the right way. So there's some links for you that relate to me specifically. The top link is my university profile. If you want to see what my university profile looks like. That's my job title, that's what I do, that's a lot of what I do, not everything. Obviously, Canterbury Christchurch link, my email address if you want to reach out, my LinkedIn profile, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to, my ORCID ID for some of the research I've been doing. There's no obligation to go and look at this, but if you wanted to, you could. And if you wanted to reach out, I would love to hear from you. End of presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Before we have any questions, can I just say one thing? I did mention this at the beginning, but anyone who joined late might not have heard it. I think all of you know the web page for this event at BCS. If you don't, go to bcs.uk and have a look. It's under members and the rest of it. That page will shift from where it was to a link at the bottom, which is basically our previous events. Because it is now our previous event, will be in a few minutes. And you can find it there. And in the next week or so, a link will appear to Tim's presentation, because as you've seen, the presentation is, shall I say, infested with links. And
there are links in the bottom bar as well.
Important.
Yeah.
So so you need to be able to click on those. They'll be there. I'll probably send something round about that, but it'll go to the entire membership. The video recording of this will take a little longer because it has to be processed by BCS. But within 2 or 3 weeks, there will also be a link to the video recording, which will appear on YouTube. So just to let you know that before you go any further.
If I stop sharing, because I don't think we'll need the presentation now, especially, then people can actually see me when I'm answering the questions. Is that okay? Yeah.
Right.
says, have I stopped
Well,
sharing?
you
Yeah.
see Tim properly now.
Right.
Just you need a different view.
There you go. So you can see me now. Hi.
Hello, Margaret. Yes.
Hello, Margaret. You're central in our screen.
I don't know why that's.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Any questions for anyone? You've probably got a lot to go away to answer your questions. To look at all that.
You might need time to process what I've been talking about today. That's why I've given you my email address, my LinkedIn profile. Seriously, if anybody wants to reach out, if you have questions or you want some clarification, or you just come up with a crazy idea and you want to say, Tim, do you think this is possible? Reach out to me. Okay, I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. I'm usually pretty hot on emails, but we're just about to start semester 2 next week, so my workload might go up a little bit. But please do reach out and I'll reply to you as quick as I can, if you can't think of a question now.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tim. I'd just like to announce before we finish, our next event is in 4 weeks' time, in here again and also online. And the short title is Careers in Cybersecurity. It's a bit more than that, in fact, and you should go and look at the webpage to find out more. Our speaker is from Pfizer, UK, and it should be a very interesting talk. Thank you everyone for coming, both online and in person, and hope to see you again soon.
Can I just double check you haven't got any questions? No? Okay. Oh, hang on, we've got a question at the back. Go on then.
How
Leslie.
important do you think AI is going to play with it?
With virtual reality specifically, or in education generally?
With virtual.
We're already starting to use artificial intelligence in virtual reality, in fact, in XR technologies in general. Body swaps have only in the last couple of months incorporated it into their software. That's how seriously they're taking it. Engage have probably been there for the last 6 months, and they launched an educational package 2 days ago to try and push it out to education, because they know this is an educational tool, not just a commercial tool. So it's important. Why? Because it's growing. It's being picked up by people who are developing software that we are using. And if they've picked it up, then they've looked at the trends of using this technology, and they think it's important enough to incorporate into their packages, their software that they're developing. That in itself tells you that this is a growing trend, and it's a trend that's not going anywhere. So yeah, it's important. And partly because it allows us to personalize feedback to students on the fly, almost immediately, which means that their immersive environment and their immersive experience is that much more interactive. You're not having to wait for a lecturer, for example. You might be the 20th person I need to talk to. You're going to go cold by the time I get to you. Using AI gives you that feedback almost immediately. That can only be a good thing. Thank you for your question. Someone did have their hand up online. It might have been Margaret, actually.
Margaret, yes.
Did you have a question, Margaret? Are you on mute at the moment because I can't hear you? Are you picking anything up?
I'm unmuted at my side, but Margaret has to do it too.
Yeah.
Margaret?
No.
You're still muted.
No, she's not muted, she says. No. Could you write something in the chat and I'll pick up the question from there? Sorry. Gotta love technology, right? What were we just talking about for the last hour? See, you should have done this in VR. Or web-based VR. You don't have to have a headset, you can do web-based VR.
He's unmuted, so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened there. Right. So if Margaret puts that in the chat, then I can answer the question. While Margaret's doing that, does anyone else in the room have a question?
Would AI change assessments?
Yeah. Margaret's question is, will AI change assessments?
There's been a lot of discussion about that recently here at the university, and how careful we need to be about allowing the use of artificial intelligence, how we would incorporate that into an assessment, how can we make sure we've still got validity and uniqueness of a student's submission, whilst allowing artificial intelligence to be used. Interestingly, the university has now published its policy on the use of artificial intelligence for assessments. We don't ban it. We don't say you can't use artificial intelligence in your submissions. What we say is that you need to declare it, what you've used, how you've used it, what the output was, and what you understand by that. So it's like you're citing the AI tool, the AI engine, basically. And by you explaining what you've been asking and what your interpretation is of the output, then we've still got that academic rigor there, because what we're saying is, well, actually, you need to understand what it's saying. From my own personal perspective, I don't have a problem with AI. It's just as much a tool as a web browser. So back in the 2000s, and we got, web browsers came out, and this magical thing called the internet and the World Wide Web. Same argument was actually at the time, saying, oh my goodness, now everyone's going to copy from everybody else, and we're not going to have validity of academic submissions. Yeah, well, we've got around that one. Okay, Google is a portal to the largest repository of information we have available to us. AI is just an interpretation of that. So my own perspective is I don't have a problem with AI per se, but I would rather you use AI to help you structure your response from a structural perspective, but not from a content perspective. So some students genuinely have problems trying to know where to start, how to structure a report, how to organize their studies. Okay, you can use AI for that as a tool, but don't use it for content. Because if you use it for content, technically that's not yours anymore. So although the university has a policy of encouraging the use of AI within a certain context, for me, I'm happy being used for structural, but not for content-based. So it's all about making sure that what the students are submitting, they understand, they can interpret, they can analyze, and they have an opinion on. So yes, it is going to change assessments. It's already changing assessments. We already have an AI policy, and we already have an AI declaration on the submission point of every submission that's now submitted via our Blackboard VLE. So it's already having an impact. Whether we see that as positive or negative, well, time will tell, right?
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, I can hear you then.
We can hear you.
We can hear you now.
What, really?
Yeah. Wow.
I was going to say, thank you very much.
Yes.
Can I just do a slight follow-up? Do
Yes,
you think that the assessments will actually then start including an element of either vivas or exams? I can say this is a past examiner of your university.
Yes. I mean, we do have exams in some of our courses, not all of them, but some subject areas prefer to use exams, partly because of the subject area rather than because of AI. But I do agree with you. I think vivas will be used an awful lot more. Presentations will be used an awful lot more, which I suppose is a kind of viva. And we were talking about that today at our curriculum development meetings about the assessment types we're going to be using. And we were saying about using presentations and vivas to get that validity of assessment in there. But what's also interesting is how we can use group work to influence that. So actually getting people working as groups of 3, groups of 4, having peer evaluations as part of that, having an activity log. So we can actually see session by session what they've been doing, how they've been doing that, what the outcomes were, what the action points were. You can't do that in AI. You're not going to get the level of accuracy you need to be able to produce that type of event log. You then cross-reference that with peer evaluations as well. You start to see chinks in the armor. You start to see the holes in the submission. It will be that obvious. And it's not about banning AI. It's using assessment mechanisms that make the use of AI nonsensical. Why would you? It's not going to help you. And actually, it will do a worse job than what you would do. So why would you? So it's all about trying to discourage the use of AI for certain things. Structure, fine. Content, why bother? because actually the way that we've structured the assessment will mean that you don't need to. Okay. So we were talking about that today, funnily enough. So that's like hot topic. Really good. That was a fantastic question and very, very topical at the moment. So yeah, Vivas for sure. Exams, not for computing, but for other areas, they already use them anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks for your question.
Okay, I think we probably need to finish now. So thank you very much again to Tim.
Thank you.
And hope to see all of you again soon on future meetings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.